Hi everybody, this is Miss Madeline and today I'm coming to you from the Grout Elementary School garden and we get to talk about one of my favorite things today, soil and worms. Ooh. So we are going to be asking ourselves some questions about the soil and the worms, thinking about what we know about worms, and then we will get down into the soil and see what we can discover about worms' body parts and what they're doing here in our garden. What is soil and who lives in the soil? Let's check it out. Soil is where our plants live, and a lot of other creatures live in the soil too. It provides water and nutrients to the plant's roots, and it provides a habitat for creatures like worms and centipedes and beetles. Some creatures in the soil, like centipedes, are big enough for us to see, but there's a lot that's living in the soil that's too tiny for our eyes to see. But the soil is teeming with life. One of the most important soil creatures to the garden are earthworms. So that's what we're going to be looking at mostly today. As we explore worms today, we'll be asking ourselves, how do worms help the garden? So we'll be looking at their body parts and seeing what they're doing in the soil to try to answer that question. Worms have a lot of different body parts that help them survive and help them function in the soil. One of the coolest things about worms is that they have 5 hearts. How many hearts do you have? Probably just one. Worms have 5. They have a head with a mouth where they can eat and chew and swallow their food. They have a clitellum, which tells us that the worm is an adult worm, a grown-up worm. It uses that clitellum to make an egg sac. It is made up of body segments that are a bunch of little rings, and they have a tail where they poop out the food that they're done digesting, and that gets added into the soil. So we'll take a closer look at some of these body parts on some real live worms that we're about to dig up out of our own garden. There are a lot of cool facts about worms. What do you know about worms? Worms have a head end to their body, and they have a mouth, but they don't have eyes and they don't have teeth. They can sense the difference between light and dark, but they eat food that's really tiny, so they don't really need to chew on it with teeth like we do. On this worm, you can really see the clitellum. That's this band that's slightly bigger and a different color than the rest of its body. Like I mentioned before, the clitellum tells us that this is a grown-up worm. It doesn't mean it's a boy or a girl. In fact, there are no boy or girl worms. They are all just worms. Worms use those mouths to dig tunnels through the soil, eating all the way through. And when that food passes through their body, it comes out the other side through their tail end as worm poop. But worm poop is really good for the soil. Do you see how nice and crumbly this soil is? That's all thanks to the worms. Their tunnels and their poop helps keep the soil nice and rich and healthy and full of nutrients that plants can use. These worms were in this chunk of soil that whole time I was holding it. Worms have slimy skin that they keep moist in the soil to help them breathe, because they actually breathe through their skin. But they don't like to be dried out. That makes it harder for them to breathe. Worms live in gardens, but they also like to live in the backyard, in a park, lots of different places. So I invite you to go outside and try to find a worm in your own neighborhood. And if you do, there's a really good way to hold a worm very securely in your hand by cupping it and then giving the worm a little shade. Remember, worms can sense the difference between light and dark, so it will be happier if you give it a little roof over its head to provide some shade. After watching this video, you can do the activity sheet and fill out the body parts of a worm. And you can go out and look for worms in your own neighborhood. But before you head out to do either of those things, let's take a minute to just be quiet with ourselves and think about what it would be like to be a worm. For this, I just want you to sit comfortably, close your eyes, and think about what it would be like to be a worm. Even if you have noises going on around you, take some deep breaths. Think about what would it be like to breathe through your skin like a worm. So as you breathe in and out, focus on your skin. What does the air feel like on your skin? How warm or cold is it? Imagine the air flowing, not through your nose or mouth, but through your skin. Your moist, slimy worm skin. Thanks for joining me today as we explored the soil and worms. I hope you have fun looking for worms outside, doing our worksheet. And if you happen to find a worm and can take a photo of it, feel free to send that to me at mmiller@growportland.org. See you next time.